Hello and welcome to Business Daily on Trust Television. On this program, we bring you factual and, of course, in-depth analysis of major developments across different sectors of the Nigerian economy. I am Christiana Amodu Otinya. It's always a pleasure to have you join us on the program. And we are set, of course, to keep the numbers rolling in for the new week. First, let's give you the headlines. Salary growth in Nigeria drops to 21-month low amid issues of high inflation. Now, Naira redesign, CBN pledges to protect rural Nigerians. We'll bring you more update around business stories in the Business Roundup segment of the program. However, I'll take a short break. When we return, time to take updates from the stock market. Please stay. Welcome back. Now let's get into the equities market segment and see how a lot of major markets indeed finished last week and how markets, of course, are starting this week. We'll begin from the home buzz in Nigeria. The Nigeria Exchange Limited, located in Custom Street in Nigeria's commercial hub, Lagos, of course, appreciated by 0.06% to end at 43,968.75. So we saw the Nigeria market finish largely in bullish zone. Now on activities levels, a total volume of 209.7 million shares valued at 2.2 billion naira changed hands in 2,942 deals on the local burs. The equity cap settled at 23.95 trillion naira. Of course, a lot really happening on the Nigeria market. Trading have started, physical trading, in-person trading have started on the local buzz. Investors are optimistic that the bullish run that the market finished for Friday will, of course, extend into the new week. Going to other parts of Africa now, the JSE FTSE All-Share Index, talking about what's happening in Johannesburg, is higher here. There's a rally, as we can see from here, 0.07% to end at 73,036. Now, you might be wondering what's responsible for the JSE FTSE All-Share hitting as high as the 73,000 mark. Now, there were hopes around the rebound in the Chinese economy, and this sparked the rally that you're seeing happening here. Now, Beijing announced shorter quarantine periods for individuals in close contact with COVID patients, spurring hopes that additional measures to reopen the economy could follow and stimulate demand for base metal. Now, for Ghana, the JSE was down, finished lower, 0.48% at 2,450, as you can see there. Now, let's go over to the US and see what's happening on that front. Now, it's still remaining bullish. The bulls are holding on tight for the U.S. market, for the Dow Jones Industrial Average, the S&P 500, and the tech-heavy Nasdaq Composite. Now, global market received a boost last week from key U.S. inflation figures, which showed prices had risen less than expected in the month of October. Investors cheered the inflation reading, also betting that the Federal Reserve will soon slow its aggressive tightening campaign. We have seen the U.S. Federal Reserve, led by Jerome Powell, stay largely hawkish, of course, to rein in inflation, and we are seeing U.S. inflation 7.7%. That number is slowing down, signifying that a lot of the work put in by the Federal Reserve of the U.S. is yielding results. Now, the S&P 500, the tech-heavy Nasdaq, and the Dow Jones Industrial Average, all here, the arrows are staying significantly green. The Nasdaq nudged as high as 7% last week when the inflation figures came in. Let's go over to the European Strait now. European stocks were cautiously higher as investors assess recent U.S. inflation data alongside a warning from a top Federal Reserve official in the U.S. So the FTSE 100 in the U.K. is up 0.57% here. The CAC run in France, talking about the CAC 40, is up 0.35%. And the DAX in Germany climbed 0.57%. So we are still seeing the bulls playing in the floor for the week. Going over to Asia now, Asia markets closed mixed as Japan's benchmark index was dragged lower by tech giant SoftBank Group, and that's talking about the Nikkei 225 in Japan is down here 1.06%. For mainland China, the Shanghai Composite, of course, is down 0.13%, and the Kospi in South Korea is down 0.34%. A lot really happening with what's happening, especially with the COVID restrictions in China. We are seeing the markets react to that. Let's go over to the commodity prices now. Oil prices climbed nearly 1% extending gains from the previous session as China eased some of its strict COVID-19 protocols, fueling hopes of a recovery in economic activity and demand at the world's top crude importer. Now, on Indonesian island Bali, ahead of the G20 summit, U.S. President Joe Biden and Chinese leader Xi Jinping will meet in person on Monday for the first time since Biden took office. And that's going to also be a focus for economic watchers this week, talking about what's happening in Bali, Indonesia, the G20 summit. We're having big heavyweights around the world come together for that summit. And that's going to be there are going to be big news, of course, coming out from that strait. Now, it's really red. It's red here for the commodities market. Brent crude is doing $95.93 per barrel, down 0.06%. For the bullion, the yellow metal gold shed 0.49%. As you can see from the charts we have up here, to $1,762. For silver is still staying around the $21 mark, $21.57, down 0.51%. For palm oil, that's talking about the agro-commodities, palm oil is shedding over 3% here, 3.29%. And for wheat is down 0.69%. Cocoa is at $2,520 per metric ton, down 1.49%. So a lot of focus for the commodities market, and we are seeing the markets opening the week largely in red zone. Market watchers, those that invest in this market, are staying hopeful that we are going to see some level of green return to the markets as, of course, the week develops and as more data coming from different countries around the world. There's a focus for GDP figures, for inflation figures. So a lot of investors in this trade are monitoring what's happening with key business data. Let's go over to the cryptocurrency market. Now, the crypto market received a very big blow, talking about what's happening with the FTX exchange filing for bankruptcy. And that really sent shivers down the spine of those that have invested in cryptocurrency. We saw issues around that dominating the headlines from last week and even dovetailing into the weekend. Now, the crypto market is still trying to recover from the big blow received last week. Investors are monitoring the fallout from the 3-year-old FTX and its sister company trading firm Alameda Research, still unclear to the extent of the damage. And now this is going to spread across the crypto market. About 130 additional global companies, including Alameda and FTX US, have also begun the bankruptcy process. So Bitcoin, which is the flagship cryptocurrency, is up 2.41% at $16,767. Ethereum is up 2.81% here at $1,248. And we have Binance. The Binance coin dropped below the $300 mark, I beg your pardon. It's doing at $279.08, up 1.71%. So there was a lot of outcry from those that have invested, especially in FTX exchange. There were issues around corruption, issues around Sam Bankman-Fried, that's the owner of the FTX exchange, issues around so many things around corruptions, around monies that were passed through a supposed black door, and how that affected the crypto market. And some analysts, especially back home here in Nigeria, have said it is time to give kudos to the Central Bank of Nigeria, headed by Godwin Emefiele, and of course the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC here in Nigeria, because when the whole frenzy around cryptocurrency really started, the CBN kicked in, the SEC, of course, sent out a lot of warning signals to Nigerians that to invest in markets such as this, it is imperative that you understand how the market works and what you're putting monies into. Billions of dollars were lost, especially under the FTX exchange issue. And there's still a whole lot of focus as to, will there be sanctions, will there be consequences for investors losing these monies? And the CBN kicked in here, back here in Nigeria, and say, okay, we don't understand what's happening, especially with this market here. So it is imperative to protect investors, local investors in Nigeria. And that's why we are seeing issues around the transparency and accountability in the cryptocurrency market have come to the fore, having brought into front burner position when the collapse of the FTX exchange happened. Of course, Binance had stepped in initially to say, oh, we want to help with the liquidity crunch. But Binance indeed pulled out in the middle of issues, and that sent a lot of jitters around the market. And we saw how the whole issue culminated to FTX filing for bankruptcy. We'll, of course, continue to monitor developments across different markets, from the equities market to the commodities market, the oil market, and the culminate with the crypto market to give you updates on Business Daily. However, that's the much we can take, of course, for the stock market. But let's quickly give you updates from business stories. And we'll begin from what's happening, especially with salaries. The second quarter of 2022 had the slowest growth in salaries and wages in Nigeria since the third quarter of 2020, when the nation entered a recession brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic. The National Bureau of Statistics, NBS, released new statistics showing that employee remuneration, wages and salaries decreased in real terms from 6.48% in the first quarter to 3.93% in the second quarter. It decreased from 19.44% in second quarter 2021 by 15.51 percentage point on annual basis. Now, in line of its plans to restructure the Naira, the Central Bank of Nigeria has vowed to safeguard Nigerians who live in rural, underserved and unbanked areas. The CBN stated in a statement issued by its Director of Corporate Communications, Osita Nwanisobi, that it had been working with relevant organizations and other financial system players to prevent the disenfranchisement of vulnerable individuals. The growth in currency deposit among banks and other financial institutions, according to the bank, indicates some progress. And that's how much we can take for business stories. Our focal point on the program today, of course, will be on the power sector. What are the developments we have seen in the power sector? However, for some time now, we have seen some players and groups in the power sector they have called for franchising of distribution companies to make them more viable and indeed make better service delivery in the electricity sector. Now, I'll be joined on the program today by Adetayo Adegbenle. He is the Executive Director and Convener at Power Up Nigeria, and he will be speaking to issues around the franchising of distribution companies. Adetayo, it's good to have you join us on the program.
Yeah, good morning.
Now, a lot has been said around the issue of franchising. Quickly, I want to know where you stand around franchising of distribution companies to bring about further viability and also bring about better service delivery in the power sector. Quickly.
All right. Let's start with this. This is not a strange idea. It's a very simple. In fact, it was first of all brought to the fore by the NERC themselves. That's the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, whereby we have a situation where maybe there is an area where a disco is not able to service effectively. And I mean, you have the money, so you can come in and say, okay, let's take this area from you on so and so arrangement, and we'll do it for you. You know, there is nothing absolutely wrong with this, especially when you will look at the operations in the power sector so far. I mean, we still have consumers buying transformers by themselves. In trying to resolve the issue of metering, we've been forced to introduce the meter asset provider, where consumers will still have to pay for the meters, and they will be, upfront. They will have to pay upfront, and they have to be paid back later. So what we are saying is, most of the argument also says that most of the franchise areas are too big, for
Adetayo, I want to hold you on that thought. Let me quickly hold you on that talk. We'll take a short break. When we come back, you will land on what you're saying around franchising of distribution companies in Nigeria. Of course, there's a whole lot of issues around big words or throwing around policies. But Nigerians have said what is important to them is having power to run businesses as a key sector. The MSME sector really need the electricity sector to work in tandem to be able to add value to the nation's economy. You'll get to hear more from Adetayo after this short break. Please stay.
TV, documenting the Nigerian story.
Welcome back, and thank you for still staying there with us on the program. If you're just joining the program, this is Business Daily, and we're coming to you from Trust Television, of course, your trusted TV network. And like I mentioned earlier, before we went on that short break, we're focusing on the power sector on the program today. Just before the program, in my preparation to the program today, I spoke to a cross-section of Nigerians, of course, in my network, and I asked basically, how's the power supply in your area? And about 70% of the people I spoke with said, oh, to be fair, the power supply has been quite okay, or the power supply has increased in their areas. Now, I want to bring in Adetayo Adegbenle, who is the convener of Power of Nigeria. He is my guest. He's joining us virtually from Plateau State. He was just speaking about franchising. However, before you continue on what you were saying about franchising of the distribution companies, now what would you attribute the increased power supply we are seeing currently to, at least from the people I spoke with, the increased power supply we're seeing currently? What's the cost, or why do you think we have better power supply now?
Oh, well, the truth is the power sector too has not been sleeping. So there have been activities. In fact, I give a big kudos to the Transmission Company of Nigeria. I mean, if you follow them and the activities in the last 1 month, I mean, let me just try and be conservative. Last 1 month, you will say it's about commissioning this project, about commissioning completion of these things, about telling us we are adding another 60 MVA transformer, capacity to so and so. In fact, the Minister of Power, I think yesterday or 2 days ago, mentioned, the fact that there's an ongoing work in APCO, one of the APCO substations right now, that's going to add a minimum of 1,000 megawatts capacity to the national grid. I mean, that's not small. Challenges that we've been facing so far coming from them. So basically what we are saying is we're at some point getting a thorough quote from generation, and the bottleneck that we used to have in transmission is getting eased off, and things are now getting more power are now getting to consumers. Yeah, so I mean, so I would give kudos to them at that point. But then the position, the role that we play in the power sector, it's funny because while some people are singing praises and saying, to be fair, power supplies has improved, we also have a whole sector that would disagree with that. But then that's not. I think I want to play more on the work in progress. Things are so bad, and I don't believe we can solve the problem overnight. The same thing I tell consumers in Jalingo, the same thing I tell consumers in Damaturu, the same thing I tell consumers in Ibadan. One of the things I want us to play a bit more of emphasis on is kind of commitment that we are seeing. I mean, early this year we saw management take over, changes in some of these discourse. Yeah. So you get to see that the new management are actually working. I mean, this morning I have spoken to about 2 CEOs of 2 different discos already. And what our conversation centered on has been how to improve services in their franchise area. So it's working.
Speaking about the distribution company. Speaking about the distribution companies, like you have mentioned, now let's go into this issue of the franchise regulation. Now, beyond just saying franchise regulation, franchising of distribution company, I want you to break it down as concise as you can. What does this really mean, and how would it benefit the Nigerian watching us now and talking about franchising distribution companies?
All right. I was trying to lay the foundation earlier before we went on break. The thing is, right now, most of the services in the distribution end, especially, is still being subsidized by consumers that are not meant. It's not their business. I said this thing. I was watching one interview that I did earlier. You will not go and buy. Yes, you need financial services in your village, but will you, because of that, go and buy ATM for Zenith Bank or for any of the banks and say, come and install it? No. It's their duty to do that. It is the duty of the discos to buy transformers, buy poles, buy cables, and do the installation. But as we speak right now, I'm sure if we allow people to call in, you will hear from different areas of Nigeria where it's still the consumers that buy the transformers. It's not terrible that when you want to install, the discos will still ask you to pay for the installation and for it to be powered on. It's that terrible. So what we are saying is, instead of having this bottleneck that nobody seems to have a direct answer to, why don't you let's do this? I mean, speaking to the regulators now, and incidentally, I've been invited to come and speak to it at the regulatory level. Unfortunately, I've not been able to find time to go. You see, the good thing about it was in September 2020, we changed our tariff plan by saying we now have bands. The truth is this: there are bands, there are places that have been placed an E that their services will not improve in the next 10 years if things continue the way they are going, and if there is no regulatory intervention. So why don't you say this? The discos have not been able to improve a lot of areas. I can mention names of some similar areas that we keep having reports from. There are places that is as bad as, I mean, when we say a whole local government, and I know at least 2 whole local governments that are not powered presently, are not on the national grid. A whole big chunk of Borno State is not on the national grid. How do we get these places on the national grid? Where does the finance come from? The discos presently, do they have the wherewithal, financial muscle to bring this, to spend that money and bring all these locations on board? Now, we're not even speaking about the challenges that discos are having on their own. So what do we do? Why don't you say, you know what? This local government, for instance, have not been able to come on national grid because power did not get there, because the investments to get there, they don't have transformers, they don't have substations, distribution substations, bring power to them and everything. If we have investors, after all, we'll be having investors that are going off grid already. They are doing off grid and mini grids all over the place. So why don't let's take it a bit further. So all those kind of locations that power have not been to in 2 years, all those locations that we know that the discos cannot do anything to improve their power in the next 5 years. Why don't you say these areas, if you're under band C or band D, band C says that you're going to receive less than 12 hours of power supply per day. How many places are actually receiving that kind of thing, even those places that put on band C's already? So why don't you say invite investors in? And says if you're under band C, D, or E, you are automatically open to be sub-franchised. There is no go come about it. Be sub-franchised. Now, what we are saying is, people that now have the technical know-how, that have the investments, or that can source for the funds, you'll be surprised that sometimes maybe what they need to improve their lot in places like Magboro, Mowe, Ibafo, for instance, under IBEDC, in places like Ota, Adodo Ota, under IBEDC. There are some places in Ilorin under IBEDC, as far as what's this place before Bida? There are some places like that all they need is just to have one substation, distribution substation, put in such places. Yeah. But because of the kind of challenges, management issues, financial issues that IBEDC as a management is having, they don't even have the time to go and do all these kind of things. But the moment by regulation, these places are forced, that's what I use, to are placed under sub-franchising. Yeah. What it means is that we cannot have investments. People that can go there, do their basic calculation, their maths, and see how they can make their money back, and say, okay, you know what, give me this area. I will tell you something. I know a number of factories on that Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, for instance, that are not on the national grid. They are running on generator. And these are factories that are running every day and are making products for Nigeria every day. So if I have access to any of their MDs or their chairman, and I tell them I'm taking this area up on some franchising arrangement, and I'm spending so amount, I need some investment to be made. This is the plan. I am very sure those people can actually invest the money they are using to fund their generators, the money they are using to go off grid into such things. There is nothing. We cannot keep deceiving ourselves. There is no basic power that is as stable as the national grid. It is when you have national grid that your three-phase can work. There are some manufacturing machines that cannot work on anything less than three-phase, power supply. So how do we go offline? How do we go off grid and to make all these things work? So what we are saying is, yes,
your point on sub-franchising is quite clear. And because of time, we'll have to go. But I think you're really enlightened and made the point known that that is a leeway that the government can begin to look at. And like you have stated, the regulators, that they are watching, and we hope they will take a cue from this that you have put forward. Because in the end, the country's economy needs power to run for industrialization and economic diversification to really happen and be actualized fully. Thank you for joining us from Plateau State. Adetayo Adegbenle, the convener, Power Up Nigeria. Thank you for joining us on the program. And I see your jacket there. It's really cold in Plateau.
Well, it's a bit cold. I'm always on my jacket too. I mean, at this time of the day.
Okay. Enjoy the rest of your day then. That's where we call it a wrap for the program today. Thank you for investing your time with us on the program. Don't forget you can catch up on all news making the round in the polity, and of course major business development on all our social media platforms. Trust Television to bring you all the updates as they break. I am Christiana Amodu Otinya. Thank you for joining in and continue to stay safe.